Dr. Manuel Sans Segarra, thank you very much for being here with me today. It is an honor.
Good morning. I truly appreciate this invitation and hope our conversation will be productive, especially for the audience, that it may help to awaken consciousness, which is the goal of all my work and my message.
Well done, first. His book, The Superconsciousness Exists, Life After Life, comes out today. But now, in its third edition, which means the book has been brought to light after selling sufficiently to go for a third edition from the start.
Indeed, this logically makes me proud and very happy. It means that the topic is interesting and motivates people, and that even before it has been openly released for sale, people have already pre-ordered it, has been concerned, which is a great source of satisfaction for me.
But you are already aware of the interest in what you usually share, because if you don't mind me asking, how old are you? 81 years old. And in recent years, at an age when it's uncommon, you have become something of a rock star.
Not a rock star at all. But obviously I never thought in my life I would reach a situation like this. The truth is, personally, I don't like it. I'm a very discreet, very family-oriented person. And all this about being a public figure doesn't appeal to me at all, but I have to accept it. And I believe it's a consequence of the message I convey. Message that I think at this moment, given the current state of our society, where there is a prevailing egomania, a great materialistic ego, this vision of life that is so materialistic often leads to nihilism, that is, a lack of meaning in life. And this even justifies the fact that currently, one of the most frequent causes of mortality among young people aged 15 to 35 is suicide. So in my message, what I intend is, based on a series of experiences I've had with my patients, to shed a little light, a bit of hope, to understand that life is wonderful if we approach it according to our true identity, which is not the ego. I call the ego the false identity, the non-self. We hold a real identity that reflects our superconsciousness and spirit. This superconsciousness gives our life meaning. But I repeat that sadly in our society with this egomania, the superconsciousness is like covered. It is occluded, blocked by the ego that prevents it from manifesting.
And why has our society degenerated to this point, to the point where egomania is the current evil, the evil of the 21st century?
If you look at history, I like history, until the 15th century. The Church controlled the culture of the Western world. It did an extraordinary job, both in maintaining culture and in the dissemination of culture. But from the 15th century onwards, with the Renaissance, human beings no longer agreed with the ideology or theology of the Church. The Church, when there was some phenomenon that had no explanation, for he said this is a phenomenon of divinity. And with this, the problem was resolved and the discussion ended. From the 15th century onwards, with the Renaissance, humans no longer accept this principle. They want a logical and rational explanation for all natural phenomena. Through observation and logical reasoning, they seek an explanation that justifies all natural phenomena. Then logically, this somewhat contradicts the principles of the Church. Thus, a small separation is established between the Church and the ideological thought of human civilization. The Church tries to defend its domain, its territory, first verbally and even in a violent manner. Remember the Inquisition. The one who awakened knowledge that went against these principles was sent to the stake. This materialistic view, which is based on a materialistic ontology, that is, seeking a rational and objective material explanation, as Aristotle said, the word objective is from Aristotle. Thus, this began separating Church and ideology from humanity, from the collective, from civilization, reaching points that you have heard about where we have heard that religion was a toxin. Nietzsche said God is dead. Notice the brutal separation that has been established. Up to the present, where there is exponential technological progress and people only trust and believe in the objective, what they can see, touch, and what scientific principles demonstrate to them as true. But all this materialism has completely separated him from any transcendent ideology. And this has led him to this egomania. And egomania, the ego will never allow us to be happy. It gives us moments of pleasure, but we will never be happy, nor will we ever be free. The two fundamental principles of being human. When these are taken away, the human being loses the meaning of life. This is why they are driven to suicide. This is the reality of our civilization.
We might say that the ego has taken over faith.
Yes, indeed. The ego has taken over the higher vision of human existence, which logically requires faith. Faith is believing without seeing. And to achieve what faith aspires to achieve, one must have hope. All of this has been lost. You only believe what you touch, see what is real and objective.
That idea that only believing in what can be touched, in what can be proven, would be something expected of you. Given that you have a purely scientific background, a degree in medicine, a surgeon, but instead you speak of faith
pertaining to the spirit, the ECMs, and the superconsciousness.
You have faced many criticisms or frictions with the scientific community for the message you are spreading.
First of all, I seriously question myself. As you have very well said, the training of a doctor in the Faculty of Medicine, and it is what I teach my medical students and my residents to train them in the specialty of general surgery, entirely based on a Cartesian and Newtonian scientific method, grounded in a materialist ontology, and even more so the surgeon, that moves in morphology, in anatomy, and in physiology. Therefore, our vision is completely materialistic. So, I had the opportunity, quite by chance, with some patients that I treated, to learn for the first time what a near-death experience was. And it caught my attention a lot, because it went against these principles that I so strongly defended and preached about the scientific method. And also my investigative curiosity, which I've always had. I always like when I see a phenomenon, whether organic or psychological, I like to answer two questions. What is the cause, the etiopathogenesis? And what is the intimate mechanism of production, the pathophysiology? I like to know this. So I then investigated these phenomena that the patients told me about, the NDEs, patients diagnosed with clinical death from various causes whom I revived, brought them back to life. I recovered them from death to life. Then it caught my attention that coinciding with the time of clinical death, they would describe a series of experiences to me. Because logically, if there is no cardiac activity and no cerebral mental activity, due to cardiorespiratory arrest, there is no logical scientific explanation for the person to have a series of experiences with the characteristics typical of a near-death. So, this is an incongruity. And due to my investigative spirit, I then ventured into this field, which logically is already based on a transcendent ideology. But at no point did I want to seek an explanation in aspects, let's say, of divinity, transcendence, or faith. No. I wanted objective evidence, certified or scientifically based evidence that could demonstrate what these patients were expressing to me in the NDEs, in the near-death experiences. Therefore, it's logical for you to say that you're surprised the surgeon has gotten involved in these topics. But I tell you, it's a consequence of my investigative spirit, yet always with a path grounded in objectivity and science, not in transcendent phenomena of faith and divinity. I've faced criticism. Can you imagine that I've had it, and so much of it? I began researching before finishing my active professional period. As the head of service, I couldn't speak about these phenomena at that time because they would have interpreted it as an anomaly out of place. This was entirely due to my position of great responsibility. Now, at the moment I retired, I felt morally obliged to share the conclusions I had reached through my research. And I can tell you that at first I faced people who opposed my principles. But I am pleased to tell you, for example, that last week there was a palliative care course at my hospital, and they called me to deliver the closing lecture of the Congress. Now I have to go and give the inaugural class of the university course at a prestigious university in our country. Very high ecclesiastical authorities have asked me to give these lectures in religious settings because I say the same things that religion does. That is to say, I am seeing that an opening is occurring in society towards an attempt at understanding and accepting what is inherent to being human. That we are body matter, we are mind, a consequence of the intellectual activity of our neurons, but we have something more that explains all these transcendent phenomena that patients tell us about.
You state that what you communicate is in line with religious principles.
Nope, I show it, and today it's not me. People with much more discernment and specific weight than I, even Nobel laureates, that today we can demonstrate based on cosmology and quantum mechanics in the study of subatomic particles, in the effects observed in particle accelerators like CERN, which is that of the European Union in Switzerland. As through these two avenues of research, cosmology and subatomic particles, today we can scientifically demonstrate the existence of a primary consciousness, of a primary intelligence, of an intelligent designer. It is the principle of all religions. We call it God, others call it Jehovah, Allah. Tao, the Akashic record, Brahman, call it what you will. There is a primary consciousness that created the universe, the Big Bang, 13.78 billion years ago, intervened in the emergence of life on our planet 4 billion years ago. And secondly, I demonstrate from what these patients tell us that we have a non-local consciousness. We have a local consciousness that is inherent to the activity of neurons, which disappears with death. When the neuron dies, intellectual activity vanishes. This is what puzzled me about this. But these patients recount a series of experiences because another consciousness persists. That is non-local, meaning it extends beyond the person's brain after death, which persists and explains all these near-death experience phenomena. And this consciousness is holistic in relation to the primary consciousness I mentioned. Holistic is derived from the term fractal, a mathematical term coined by Mandelbrot, a Yale University mathematician, who tells us that the primary consciousness, the total hologram, is composed of multiple parts, which have the same shape, the same design, but are smaller. Fractal comes from fractional. They are fractions, but they have their properties. And what are their properties of the first consciousness? Omnipresence, eternity, omniscience. It knows everything. Remember intuition. Intuition is knowing what is going to happen. It is an expression of our superconsciousness. And omnipotence can do everything. Remember creativity. Every work of art is creating from nothing. It arises from nothing. It is the work of the artist. It is the expression of the artist's superconsciousness that manifests or expresses it with an artistic language. Painting, sculpture, music. They asked Giacomo Puccini, how is it that you are able to create an opera like La Bohème or Madame Butterfly? Do you know what his response was? He says, I am the worker of the Almighty. It is the first awareness through my higher consciousness that gives me note by note, field by field, the stuff to convey to humanity the beauty of Madame Butterfly or La Bohème. And this was said by Brahms, Grieg, Strauss, Giacomo Puccini, Mozart, Beethoven, Handel. There is a precious book by an American journalist that is Inspiration and Composition, authored by Arthur M. Abel, a journalist known for interviewing all of these individuals. Grace, musicians who have left behind extraordinary music, a total expression of their superconsciousness. And they all come to the same conclusion, which is this inner consciousness, expression of the primary consciousness in each of us that manifests when inspired and able to compose a work like the Ninth Symphony or a Mozart concerto.
It is a beautiful theory that of the artist as a channel, merely for something greater.
Consider that Parmenides, a great pre-Socratic philosopher, said something very true. From absolute nothingness, nothing can be produced. If there is nothing and something appears, it has been created. This, with materialistic means, is not possible. It is not possible. This can only be done by the supraconsciousness, the human being. So do not be afraid. Machines and artificial intelligence will never be able to create. It manipulates data, algorithms, and software that humans provide at a speed our brains will never achieve. But it does not create. It draws conclusions from data because it is incapable of creating. This only creates the superconsciousness.
Needless to say, as this has been a recurring question in recent days on this podcast, that artificial intelligence will never have consciousness.
No. Creative consciousness, which is holistic in relation to the primary consciousness, is impossible. It will have speed, and its deductive capacity will increasingly grow due to the algorithms placed within it. It might even make us suspect that we are approaching a consciousness. But it is always deductive. It is a consequence of algorithm manipulation, but it does not create from nothing. This is only done by the consciousness of human beings, yours and mine, and that of every human being.
We were talking about near-death experiences you mentioned earlier, clinical death. But really, that's not death because you can't come back from death. As our friend Jose Mota, who was here very recently, says, what he doesn't like about death, what worries him about death, is that it's forever. That's what Mota says.
Yes, I completely agree with what Mota says. But we must consider two things: what functional death is and what definitive death is. The patients I treat for various reasons, trauma, hemorrhages, septic shock, anaphylactic shock, in post-operative complications I've had, clinical deaths. We are talking about clinical death. Clinical death means the heart stops. There are no reflexes, stops mental activity. That is to say, all vital functions stop, but the brain cells, if we act quickly with resuscitation maneuvers, are not yet damaged enough for death to be definitive. You have the proof, indeed. We apply the resuscitation measures, cardiac massage, intracardiac injection with adrenaline to stimulate cardiac contractility, assisted ventilation. Mechanically with 100% oxygen, the application of the DEAL defibrillator. All these mechanisms we perform are very well protocolized. In the first minute, we recover 33% of the patients. After the first minute, only 14%. And if more minutes pass, we recover none. Why? Because this functional arrest, initially a functional death, is not yet with permanent neuron damage. If we wait too long, the nerve cell is very sensitive to the lack of oxygen and its energy source, which is glucose, that reaches it through circulation. If it doesn't receive it, irreversible damage to the neuron occurs within minutes, leading to definitive death. Therefore, I am working on a patient who is clinically dead, whose mind, heart, reflexes, breathing are not functioning. But if I act quickly, their cells are not sufficiently damaged, which means I can recover them and restore all their vital functions. However, functionally, they are dead. In contrast, definitive death is already destruction. Above all, it starts with the cell membrane, the true brain of the cells. There is a phenomenon of transmineralization. That is, the composition of ions is altered from one side of the membrane to the other. The proteins of the cell are altered, and there is cell death, the so-called cellular apoptosis. This is already completely irreversible. Definitive death, functional death. I recover patients in functional death. This is clear, isn't it? Yes.
But precisely the fact that it is in functional death does not make us think that those near-death experiences are actually an epiphenomenon of the condition medical. That is, they're an inhibition or disinhibition, some brain area that allows having those, in the absence of a better word, those hallucinations or seeing those images. It is true that there is a similarity among the testimonies of many different patients, just as we can find a similarity in the feeling of falling off a cliff when we are between wakefulness and sleep. That is very common. It's something that many people experience.
The question you asked me is very logical and sensible. It's the same one I asked myself when I first became aware of a near-death experience case. I immediately thought, these are hallucinations, alterations in the brain's neuronal dynamics due to lack of blood flow. As we've said, the function is altered, they stop working, and these atypical emotional phenomena occur. So I said, let's study the hallucinations and compare them with near-death experiences. I want to make it clear, the patients I have seen with near-death experiences are patients who had no idea that this phenomenon existed. They didn't know about it. These experiences were a genuine surprise for them. There are cases of patients who have had recurrent near-death experiences. For example, people who have had 1, 2, 3 heart attacks, and in each heart attack have had a near-death experience. So by the second one, they already know, but the patients I'm talking about didn't know this phenomenon existed. So naturally, I went to talk. Who knows? About hallucinations, has experience, psychiatrists and psychologists. They are the ones who treat the patients. In human clinics where they are most seen is in psychotic episodes, in schizophrenia. So I went to talk to those who treat and know this pathology, which I am not familiar with. Honestly, I'm not an expert in psychiatry. So I went to talk and said, look, this is what's happening to me. These clinically dead patients, some of them, well, after I recover them, those I can recover, I operate on them and such. And in the post-operative period, they tell me they've had these experiences while they were clinically dead. Because the near-death experience completely coincides with the time they are clinically dead. Then the response, don't worry, these are hallucinations. And he told me this. And then I said to him, let's compare. Okay? Near-death experience. It has a completely logical structure. Bruce Grayson, a professor at the University of Virginia, USA, describes it very well. He is one of the most experienced individuals in the world concerning near-death experiences. He has studied them extensively for many years and has established a series of items, a series of steps. There are 16 steps. And then, if you take a near-death experience, you will see that these 16 steps are logically repeated. They can be complete or incomplete, but they follow an order, they repeat. So I asked the psychiatrist, what are hallucinations like? He says, no, they are totally absurd. They have no logic. Then I told him, in my patients, the items repeat. The differences between one patient's hallucination and another's are more about nuance than concept. Conceptually, they are the same. In hallucination, one patient's experience has nothing to do with another's. No two are alike. They are completely different. Nothing repeats. I say my patients remember their NDEs for their entire lives. The more time passes, the more present it is in their minds. He told me no. The hallucination is forgotten. Not only is it forgotten, but it also embarrasses them. They don't even want to talk about it. And finally, in the near-death experience, it causes a tremendous psychological impact. I have followed these patients. I have spoken with them over time, and it causes an impressive psychological impact on them, especially regarding their existential conception, which changes. And this determines a change in their vital dynamics, in their vital role. The hallucinations pass, and they say absolutely, they don't even remember the hallucinations. I say, then clinically it has nothing to do with it. He says, no, they are completely different. So I told him, if you say they are hallucinations, tell me a theory. How are they produced? He says, we don't know. I say then, what? We have many hypotheses. I say, are they proven? He says, no. Which one is it? A regression to REM sleep, a deeper sleep. Others say it's due to temporal lobe epilepsy. Others say it's a regression to previous experiences we already had. Others say they are neurotransmitter disorders. They are amino acids or neuropeptides involved in the transmission of nerve impulses at the neuronal synapse between one neuron and another. An increase in glutamate, some have said, a decrease in GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, an increase in opioid neurotransmitters, enkephalins, endorphins, all hypotheses. Nothing is proven. I mean, do you have any theory that denies what my patients tell me that it's false? They say, no, so you don't have a theory that justifies your point, nor do you have a certain scientific theory that denies mine. And the hallucinations are completely different from near-death experience. It has been observed that by electrically stimulating the precuneus, which is an area high and deep in the parietal lobe, manifestations can sometimes occur that may resemble in some aspects near-death experiences. For example, the sensation of splitting. They may feel an out-of-body experience. They might feel like they are outside their body, observing it, but they call it hallucinations. They do not have the complete logical structure that an NDE has. So, I, who thought they were hallucinations, came to the conclusion with psychiatrists and psychologists that clinically they are completely different, and that there is no theory that justifies the reality of hallucinations. Therefore, I found myself in a situation where this is different, but I don't know why it occurs.
But in that comparison you made with psychiatrists, I don't know if it consisted of 6 steps you told me, or if they are repeated. 16. What he told me.
16 items, described by Bruce Grace.
To distinguish hallucination from NDE, it seems to me that they were also compatible with the schizophrenia episode. In schizophrenia, for example, there are some patterns that can be commonly found in schizophrenia patients, like persecutory mania, like they're coming after me. I know something they want to extract. Watching television and believing there's a message directed at them. There are certain things you talked about that are also replicated in schizoid episodes, aren't they?
In NDEs, I have never seen them feel like they are being chased.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
One of the manifestations of hallucinations in the psychotic episode of schizophrenia is the feeling of persecution. They believe that people are chasing them, that they know things that could harm others. They can experience genuine panic with the feeling of being pursued, that they are being followed, watched, and controlled. This is one of the typical manifestations of hallucinations in schizophrenics. This is true. Yet, this phenomenon does not appear at any moment in the NDE. Individuals who have NDEs are entirely aware that their body is deceased on the table, and that they can go as far as they want. For example, a patient explained to me that her body was there. She saw her body. This is called otoscopy. They see their body. She saw the medical team. Notice, this patient was a healthcare worker who worked at our hospital and knew us. She didn't know because when she was admitted to the hospital, she was clinically dead after a serious accident. And she told me, "You were giving me a massage and you injected my heart." She identified us. During the near-death experience, Dr. So-and-so, the anesthetist, intubated me. Dr. So-and-so, the hematologist, was giving me blood because I had a very significant hemorrhage. In other words, they are aware of this completely. I mean that the near-death experience is a sensation that they detach from their body and that they are another identity, another consciousness apart from their body and their former consciousness. There is a local or neuronal consciousness that disappears with clinical death, which is inherent to the activity of neurons. But when clinical death occurs, the brain does not function, and this consciousness is inhibited. Then they are fully aware that there is another consciousness that leaves their body, and is capable of going wherever they want. They say, "Doctor, if I think I'm in Australia, at the same moment I'm in Austria." This patient, for example, told me everything that was happening in the emergency room at that moment. I was surprised, because she told me, there was this person, she knew them, I already told her it was a series. She was in emergency resuscitation, this, such. And the emergency operating rooms were far from where she was in the recovery room, she told me. The trauma team was operating on a fractured femoral neck. I was so surprised when I finished, because she told me everything in detail, that I went to the emergency room, checked computers, and talked to the staff, and exactly what she told me. When her body was dead on the stretcher, and I was resuscitating her, is what was happening. And it's not my case. Take the world biography. It's full of these cases. There are cases as anecdotal as a patient being resuscitated in the United States who recounted certified what was happening at that moment with all kinds of details, what happened in Australia, in the Antipodes. There is a transfer of information independent of time. It is at the same moment and of space. Distance doesn't matter to them when they are in the astral dimension. This has nothing to do with hallucination. These are objective proofs. And I have more objective evidence that I can provide you. Functional magnetic resonances have been performed on these patients. And while they were undergoing functional magnetic resonance, they were asked to recount in full detail their near-death experience. And it was observed that parts of the brain were activated. But what caught the attention, and I'm not the one saying it, it's the neuroradiologists and neurologists, experts in neuroscience. I am a surgeon, and I don't understand this. When he mentioned an object that he had seen and found interesting during the near-death experience from a distance where his body was. When he mentioned it during the functional MRI, the occipital lobe was activated. In the occipital lobe is where we have the neurons, the area of the brain that interprets our vision. We see because an image enters us in the form of light photons, through the pupil, onto our retina, in the macula, in an inverted form. The image is produced, and through the optic nerve, in the form of electromagnetic waves, it reaches the occipital lobe, and the occipital lobe interprets the image. You now see me, your occipital lobe interpreting my image. When you see an image, I imagine you have a visual memory of me, because we've been together for a long time, here talking. So, I will condition memory in your occipital lobe, and today we know who produces it. Some special neurons called mirror neurons. Well, these patients from the near-death experience had a memory visual of objects they had seen from a distance during the NDE that they had never seen before. And when talking about these objects, the occipital lobe was activated because there was an interference between what was being recounted and the memory held in the mirror neurons. The neuroradiologists and the neurologists, do you know what they told me?
What?
The patient is not lying. The patient saw this image. But can you imagine? And I told them, do you realize what you're saying? Are you telling me that this patient, whom I have lying dead on a stretcher, actually saw an image at that moment from a distance? He says, with this evidence, you can assert that the patient saw that object. Doesn't this suggest to me that she moved to another plane? Exactly. For her to see this, it means there is some information. And today, through quantum physics, we know that all information is energy, and all energy consists of electromagnetic waves. A consciousness, that is an energy, high-frequency waves, which is information, left this body and moved there to be able to see this. This is objective. This energy, evidently I don't know what it is at the moment, I still didn't know, but it's clear that something left the body, went there, and was able to see that object. The MRI justified that she had indeed seen it. And it's not just me saying it. The neuroradiologist and the neurologist told me. He told me, this patient is not lying, this patient saw the object. And I said to him, do you realize what you're telling me? He said, yes. I realized. When I finished talking with neuroradiologists and psychiatrists, do you know what they told me? They fell silent. All that euphoria about them being hallucinations amounted to nothing. It amounted to nothing. I'm going to give you another very curious example, and I advise you to do it, to read it. There is a neurosurgeon in America from Harvard. named Eben Alexander. Eben Alexander, a neurosurgeon recognized worldwide. Excellent and expert on the brain, he operates on the brain. This patient, when told about cancer experiences, would say to us, "Don't worry, let's waste time. These are hallucinations." This man, one night, starts with a headache and after a few hours, falls into a coma. His wife, who is sleeping with him, quickly grabs him and takes him to the hospital. He is admitted to intensive care, monitored, intubated, etc., etc. They perform spinal tap and the culture reveals a coliform bacillus, a gram-negative bacterium. He had meningoencephalitis caused by a coliform bacillus. This is extremely serious. Most people die. And those who recover are left with neurological sequelae, most of them. This patient was in a deep coma for 6 full days. Even his colleagues in intensive care would tell the family, "Hey, there's nothing to be done, let's disconnect him already." And the family said no. On the 6th day, this man woke up. He recovered. Rehabilitation. This patient has returned to surgery, he has recovered. This man had several near-death experiences, and he described them in a book that I recommend you read. It's the Heaven Proof. He is one of the great global advocates of near-death experiences. He is the first to say that these are not hallucinations. This is something else. And this something else, the scientific method cannot explain to us. Because the scientific method is based on the objective, the material, the real, what you see and touch. And here there is something that we neither see nor touch. But it exists, it moves, it leaves the body and goes, and it allows us to explain these phenomena, what we do not know it is. So, to explain this, we must approach another discipline, which is quantum physics, quantum mechanics. The concept of quantum mechanics within theoretical physics was introduced by Max Planck in the year 1900, Nobel Prize winner. And then, in quantum mechanics, we do see that there are a series of principles and laws that have a great parallel with the phenomena that patients recount in near-death experiences. And they explain to us, due to the great parallelism that exists, what the scientific method could not explain to us. And I cannot assert that this is definitive. Perhaps in a few years, with scientific progress, we will discover other things that will explain to us through another mechanism, something that is indeed real and exists, because we have objective evidence, the near-death experience. But now, what brings us closer to the explanation, by parallelism, by proximity, is quantum mechanics with its principles and laws, with the phenomena of the near-death.
Something that materialist scientists and those who oppose this perhaps supernatural idea of near-death experiences will argue is that, for example, the Imperial College of London has conducted studies with ayahuasca and has been able to replicate many NDEs with ayahuasca, which we know is psychedelic, right? It induces a changed state of mind. They are hallucinogenic substances.
Ayahuasca, derivatives of lysergic acid. I agree with all of this, yes. I agree with you. There are even, especially in primitive tribes, you know, there were shamans who, when they wanted to know something about the future, would perform dances, jumps and things, and take hallucinogenic substances. It's true. What happens with hallucinogenic substances? What hallucinogenic substances do is inhibit our ego. And in people with a special sensitivity, who may have more ease, there are people who are consciously capable of having a near-death experience, intentionally, by choice. Why do they possess it? I have no idea, but some people are noted to have had near-death experiences. That is to say, they unfold, leave, and go on astral journeys. In other words, there are people who have a sensitivity, they are evolved. Well, these shamans were evolved individuals, and with these hallucinogenic substances, they inhibited their ego and could contact their superconsciousness. This is true, this is a fact. But I mean that what they expressed were manifestations of their superconsciousness. You said it, similar to what they described as an NDE. Be careful, let this be clear. I will never advise anyone to take a hallucinogenic substance because they cause very significant neural disorders, especially sensory ones. And in the long run, they can cause psychosis. Let it be very clear that no one should think, man, if I want to discover my superconsciousness, I'm going to take hallucinogenic substances. This is the greatest absurdity. You should never take this. You should never do it. But what you said, and in primitive trials, they did it like this. For example, in Tibetan Buddhism, you know that when they studied a reincarnation to ensure that a person was the reincarnation of an important lama, they had a group of people of this kind, with this sensitivity, who took hallucinogenic substances, did a series of things and so on, and confirmed through their superconsciousness, which is omniscient, that knows everything, whether that person was indeed the reincarnated lama they suspected. In other words, this is a reality. But be careful. Let it be very clear that hallucinogenic substances should not be taken at all. They cause psychosis, which is serious. But if a hallucinogenic substance is hallucinogenic because it produces hallucinations, if a hallucinogenic substance can replicate an NDE, doesn't that imply that NDEs are hallucinations? No. They are completely different. What the hallucinogenic substance does in sensitive people with the ability to have a near-death experience is that it inhibits the ego, and then their superconsciousness emerges. Their superconsciousness manifests, which is completely different. It is not a hallucination. There are people who do not have this sensitivity, who take hallucinogenic substances, and then they do have hallucinations, the addicts. For example, which we sadly see a lot, they have their own separate world. When they fall into deep distress, feeling life is meaningless, in this profound nihilism that develops in our current society, due to the reign of egomania, people then to escape turn to drugs and such things. These individuals then experience hallucinations. They have a pleasurable world, something entirely different.
And hearing about clinical death, I remembered something that was like a tremendous fear shared by many human beings, which fortunately is rarely heard of now, but it is catalepsy. I mean, it's rarely heard of now because at one point there was talk that one could be cataleptic and that could lead to having no vital signs and therefore being buried, which is the greatest fear of human beings.
There are documented cases.
Yes, and there have been cases. This is going to make people feel very uneasy. Scratches on coffins and things like that, of someone who apparently had suffered a cataleptic episode, and even with a happier ending, a video of a funeral went viral at the time. I don't know if it was in Brazil where the deceased sat up because they weren't actually dead, but rather it was someone who apparently was going through an episode of this medical condition or circumstance.
I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a psychiatrist. The truth is I have no experience in this, but we, for example, in transplants, we perform transplants. The Bellvitge transplant team, we are not in a position to extract an organ from a donor and transplant it to another person if we don't have a 24-hour interval with a flat electroencephalogram and flat at 24 hours. A cataleptic person does not have a flat electroencephalogram. They have brain activity. Therefore, at the slightest brain activity you see on the electroencephalogram, you cannot say they are dead. Thus, you cannot remove an organ from a donor for transplantation to another person unless a completely flat electroencephalogram has been performed first, without any of the 5 possible waves that a normal human can have on the electroencephalogram, and you must wait for a 24-hour interval. And after 24 hours, you perform another electroencephalogram, and if it confirms that it is absolutely flat and the person and family are donors, then you artificially maintain vital functions, heart, ventilation, so that the organs are not damaged, and then proceed with the extraction of the heart, pancreas, lungs, which would leave you astounded. This means that it can be proven, without a shadow of a doubt, that someone is in a cataleptic state, and we are not in danger of that. For this reason, precisely notice that no one is buried at the moment they die. So, just to clarify, it's required. They let a day, half, or 2 go by. Between death, the diagnosis of death, physical, and the burial. That is to say, an interval must pass to demonstrate that during this time the person is truly dead.
Do people who have experienced these episodes not also talk about this kind of experience?
or had any testimony from any person been read or encountered. I have no experience. I don't know if it exists. I haven't read it. What I don't know, I don't like. I have no trouble saying
I find it commendable.
I really don't know.
And what
this.
about the people who have senses? Altered or rather nullified, a blind person, a deaf person. Can a deaf person hear in an ECM? They later claim that they have heard.
It's a very good question. There is a study of a doctor who studied and searched and followed patients from various places who had physical defects, amputees, blind, deaf, etc. And then these patients who had organic deficiencies, whether they are sensory or due to amputation, etc., or morphological. These patients who had an NDE, during the they had 100% chance. Their structure was correct, and their perceptive and communication abilities were perfect. See how extraordinary it is that some of the cases he studied were people who were blind from birth. And the first thing they said was, "Doctor," when they commented on their experience, "I have seen, I have world, I didn't know it. It's a wonder," and they wrote down things they had seen. And these people were blind from birth. So we have clear evidence that during the NDE, they regained their entire structure and normal intellectual capacity. What you said is true.
And you assert without a hint of doubt that there is life after death.
As I've told you, always operate within a scientific framework. I don't want to talk about faith, divinities, or such things. I've already mentioned that with cosmology and the study of subatomic particles in particle accelerators, we can demonstrate the existence of God. I believe it is true that God exists, because we have, I would say, many scientific proofs of his existence. And we have evidence that he manifests in each of us, through the superconsciousness, which is holistic in relation to the primary consciousness. So, what I say is that physical death does not mean the end of our existence, that our existence continues after physical death in another energetic dimension. It is due to the objective evidence, certified that I have seen in patients with NDE. What I told you about the MRI, what I told you about the transfer of information, what I have a lot of literature. The bibliography is huge. Millions of cases are noted in world biographies. Millions of near-death experiences have been reported. Don't think it's something anecdotal. It's something else that supports it. Do you believe that something that occurs in millions and everyone recounts the same is something made up? When the psychiatrist tells you that hallucinations are completely different, there are millions written. There are thousands upon thousands in the global literature. So I have certified objective evidence that there is an outlet and an awareness that is capable of providing information that confirms it for me, the MRI. It is confirmed by what these patients recount. It is confirmed by the cases we have discussed of blind people who have seen. And then I have science, which is theoretical physics, where the principles of the laws of theoretical physics have a complete parallelism that explains the phenomena to me of the near-death experience. For example, you know that in theoretical physics there is a phenomenon called the tunnel effect. What is the tunnel effect in theoretical physics? Well, it has been observed that subatomic particles are capable of passing through solid structures with an energy gradient different from theirs, as if there were a tunnel that allows them to pass through solid structures. This is thoroughly proven. It is an unshakable principle in theoretical physics. The tunnel effect. Listen, the patients are telling me that when they leave their body, one who tried to touch me passed through me. They passed through the wall and went on. They went to see the entire emergency service. All ECMs indicate that they penetrate solid structures. You have seen the film Ghost, right? There it's shown in an objective way. They kill him. What emerges represents the superconsciousness. And do you remember how it passes through people, through walls? Do you remember how it enters the subway? How does it learn to touch things and move them? In the end, it learns. This means it lowers its energy frequency gradient. It is situated on an energy gradient that is compatible with the three-dimensional energy vibration of our life. But there it is. The patient recounts exactly this. And this is only explained to me by a phenomenon that is well demonstrated in theoretical physics. It is an unmovable principle known as the tunnel effect. Why do those who see at a distance tell me at the same moment that there is a transfer of information between subatomic particles related at the same moment, independent of the distance that separates them and the time, which is at the same moment? Well, I see that there is a complete parallel with what my patients tell me. What the scientific method doesn't tell me, I see parallels with these principles of theoretical physics. And theoretical physics shows us that this is only possible with energy, and theoretical physics shows us that the fundamental principle of the universe is not matter. You, me, all of this is energy. It's collapsed energy. Human consciousness can collapse energy. That is, transform energy into matter. Eastern philosophy said this years and years ago. They said that the whole world is an illusion, and they defined it as Maya. Do you remember the word Maya? Well, we have now demonstrated from the 19th to 20th century, when theoretical physics developed, which is true. Everything we see in the world is an illusion. All of this is pure energy that we collapse. It is an illusion. Then, if it shows us that everything is energy, if it shows us that this non-local consciousness, exit, spirit, or as I call it, supraconsciousness, because it is above neuronal consciousness, we explain it with energy. With the principles of theoretical physics, we explain the phenomena they tell us about. And we have objective evidence, as I have told you, certified that what they say is true. It is not a dream. So I have to say that when a person is dead, there is something that leaves, that endures. And it leaves and is capable of explaining all these phenomena. And I just say this. I don't mention any beliefs or gods. I just present some objective facts I've discovered. And scientific theories that I see have a parallel with what my patients explain to me. That's what my book says. And I say nothing more than this. And I always rely on Nobel laureates. Read it. I don't say any of this. I haven't discovered anything, poor me. It's the Nobel laureates who say this. All these principles I talk about are all Nobel laureates. This means they are 100% certified to be true, that they can be reproduced in the laboratory as many times as you want and always yield the same result. And they know the mechanism of production. This is already a solid theory. Read. Nobel Prize. And this explains the phenomena to me. Do you agree?
Assuming there is life after death, I have also heard him say that it is scientifically proven that telepathy is a real possibility. Taking these two conditions into account, it seems reasonable that after a loved one passes away, they might try to contact their living loved ones.
There is evidence of this as well. I am talking about a transcendent proof. That is the most objective for study. It is the NDE, the near-death experience, but there are other transcendent manifestations, manifestation or expression of the superconsciousness as well. Telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, mystical experiences, psychokinesis, experiences of the dying. All of this is a transcendent manifestation of the superconsciousness. It is the same as the near-death experience. Telepathy is a manifestation of energetic communication between two people. We can define the human being from a quantum perspective as a coherent quantum complex. We are entirely composed of energies that are synchronized, and these energies manifest themselves. We continuously emit energy in a photonic form. They are photons that each person emits, and that the type of energy we emit is related to our physical and emotional state. And this can be objectified with the present moment. You know that in Russia, this has been studied extensively. There is a camera called the Kirlian camera that helps to find the aura of a human. So, according to the color, size, thickness, etc., you can detect or determine the emotional and physical state of the person. So there are other significant manifestations. What is telepathy? You are now emitting electromagnetic waves towards me, and I am emitting them towards you. Several things can happen. First, that they are coherent, as they are called. They are electromagnetic waves, then in relation to the crests and troughs, they are coherent. Then we find ourselves well, you and I here talking. It's pleasant. It can be indifferent. There is no coherence. Most social interactions. Hello, good morning, how are you? Madrid 1, the weather is nice. Good morning, and that's it. Or it can be toxic. Beware. There are people who drain your energy. Energy vampires. Exactly. Do not harm anyone. Stay away from these people. They drain your energy. You are left affected afterwards. It has disrupted your quantum coherence. So telepathy is nothing more than a very deep state of energetic communication between two like-minded people. It is very common for two people who are very close friends or very close to have a deep emotional connection, that sometimes they are separated or just as they are. And one comes up with a topic that has nothing to do with what they were talking about or experiencing at that moment, and the other starts laughing. They say, hey, I was thinking the same thing. There is telepathic communication. It happens to me a lot with my wife. I laugh a lot. Because we are talking about a topic, you stop and then you start thinking about something that has nothing to do with what we were talking about. And then my wife comes out and brings up this topic and I start laughing. When I start laughing, she already knows. She says, were you thinking this? Yes. This is common among people who have a close emotional bond. It's telepathy. It's energetic communication.
But I say, doctor, more than telepathy, it must be 50 years together, or God knows how long they've been together. 55 years together, I think that, of course, that leads to telepathy. Inevitably, I was talking about ghost earlier. Anyway, the question I was asking was about whether loved ones hold significance afterwards.
Yes, sorry, we didn't talk about this. Yes, there are folks. Who? But as I tell you, the spirit, that is the superconsciousness of the person who passes away. First of all, I have to tell you something else, another detail that I haven't mentioned. This patient I mentioned to you, for example, when she was during her NDE, tells me it is common to contact loved ones. You will find it described in all of them. It is very common. They can contact loved ones with animals. There are people who have even contacted, have found their pet think that every living being has consciousness. Every living being. What happens is that there are different degrees of consciousness. We have the highest, we have consciousness and self-awareness. This patient, crying, told me, Doctor, I found my mother who had passed away. I was very close to her. We hugged, we communicated telepathically in the astral world. She was in an NDE. She says death does not exist. He says, I saw my mother, I was with my mother. We communicated with my mother. And this is very common in NDEs.
And outside of the ECMs?
It happens outside ECM. There are people who, in situations, it is common, who are deeply affected by certain emotional situations, very down in crisis, etc. A loved one may manifest in some way to come and help guide and support them in those moments. Some identify the figure, others suspect it but see it as light, as if it were a light. That is to say, they have a series. Others sometimes say, I have the feeling that my husband is beside me. I'm sure he's right here beside me. In other words, there are sometimes manifestations of the superconsciousness, which is what endures of the loved one, that can manifest and come to help a being in the human dimension who is in trouble. There are many described cases of this kind.
I was telling you that in Ghost, in the movie, how you live, and even the way you pass away affects your existence in the afterlife.
Totally. During our life, we follow a path. Teilhard de Chardin describes this very well. Teilhard de Chardin is a Jesuit, a very good theologian, dead, who was almost excommunicated for his theories on evolution. He was exiled, and they allowed some of his works to be published only after his death. And this man spoke about the evolution of the human being. Our life in the human dimension begins at the alpha point, full of impurities. And in life, we gradually eliminate impurities, until we reach the omega point, which is defined as holiness or Buddhahood, or enlightenment in Eastern philosophies. This is our path. The purpose of our life is to be, discover our superconscious, to control our ego, which we cannot eliminate. In the human dimension, we will always have an ego, but we must have a controlled ego, not one that dominates us, as is happening in our current society. In other words, there is an evolution. Then, upon dying, our true identity emerges, the superconsciousness. But we carry our history with us, what we have done in life. This is what defined where our history lies. Freud defined it in the subconscious. The subconscious is where our history is, with local consciousness, which is energy that cannot disappear. It's our karma, as they say, the law of cause and effect. We have undergone a specific evolution according to our life. Your evolution is not the same as, for example, the one Hitler underwent. It is very different. Everyone carries their own karma. So, logically, karma is what conditions our evolution. Everyone carries their karma. In other words, what we are doing completely influences our evolution to reach the omega point of holiness and Buddhahood. There are more evolved people and people who are even more evolved. They have more ease in contacting and manifesting transcendent phenomena. For example, patients who have had an NDE become tremendously intuitive. Intuition is a precognition. Intuition is what allows you to say when faced with a problem. The non-intuitive person will say, well, I think I'll do it this way, with these advantages and disadvantages. I'll do it this way, with these advantages and disadvantages. The one with the NDE will do it this way because it is the correct way, and they are not mistaken. That is to say, they are omniscient, they know everything. The omniscient in the astral world, there is only one time, which is what theoretical physics defines. In theoretical physics, time is circular. There is only the current moment. Eternity is the absence of past and future. It is always present. Intuition, everything is now. Past, present, and future. When they look at their life and describe it, which is very common in NDEs, they see everything at the same moment, past, present, and some even the future. That life, they say, flashes before them, like a movie of someone who is about to die. They see their life in flashes, and this has a tremendous impact on them, because you see, when they talk to you, I want to make it clear that I speak of those who return and what they tell me, and I investigate to see why this happens. If they don't return, I know nothing. I'm not a medium or a seer. I really don't know anything about it. I only speak of those who come, tell me what they have experienced, and then I try to explain in some way why they have this. When those with NDEs tell me, he says, after going through all these experiences they describe, there comes a moment when one considers, do they stay or return? And then they say it can be done in two different ways. She is sick, for example. Some beings of light, whom they call angels, other beings who call her, forced her. They say you have to return to the human dimension, finish your cycle. And entering the body is generally a bit traumatic. She didn't want to return. She says their life is much better. The feeling of love, peace, harmony, joy is tremendous. It's extremely high. She didn't want to return, but they forced her to return. But I have a case of a doctor who had a cardiac rhythm disorder, a complete block, and dropped dead on the floor. And he had an extraordinary near-death experience. And when he saw his life, do you know what he said? He says, I want to go back to fix what I have seen, what I have done during my life. And he returned voluntarily. This man lives. A doctor, huh? Because there are also NDEs where loved ones or people you want to see are calling you. But they decide not to go yet. They resist even though it's very tempting to go towards them or towards the light. And that's how they come back to life. That's what they sometimes say. Some say. In my cases, and I don't have experience with this, he says, those I've lived with my patients with NDEs, the return has been for these two reasons. Either they were forced to come, or they decided to come voluntarily. Those who are absent, they are dead, and I don't know what is going on.
Are NDEs always good and sweet?
No. Between 5 and 7%, less than 10%, I don't have any of these. They are terrifying and diabolical. They have a terrible time. Horrific images and things appear. These patients who have had these terrifying or diabolical experiences, later when they come back and recount them, they need tremendous psychiatric support because they have a terrible time. Why do these diabolical ones occur and such? We don't know exactly. What is certain in the study of life, of the possible karma these people carry, it does seem that there is a certain relationship with people who have led a very tumultuous life, a very troubled life. It seems so. But I don't have any of these. What I'm explaining to you is what I've read. But they exist, less than 10%, and they are called diabolical and terrifying. And these patients have a terrible time afterwards, because they relive them, because, as I've already told you, the NDE is remembered throughout their life. And the more time passes, the more present they are, more vivid, more present down to the smallest detail. In their mind, they are present. So these men, the terrifying one, always have it on their mind. And they live in extreme anguish, these people. I'm telling you, they need support.
And you, with everything you've learned, with everything you know, with everything you've researched and continue to research, what is your opinion about euthanasia? That is, about one having the power to decide over their own death.
Euthanasia. Look, it must be evaluated from different perspectives. From a medical point of view, I would tell you that I would not perform euthanasia. I'm telling you clearly. When euthanasia was approved in Parliament, the law was then passed to the different autonomous communities. And you should know that euthanasia, the mechanism is that the patient can request it, the primary care physician. Well, there are some forms, protocols to follow, and then this goes to a tribunal. This tribunal is composed of a group of people, doctors, there are judges, there are religious figures from many backgrounds. I am on the board of the Medical Association. The Medical Association was involved in the formation of this. But what the Medical Association did demand is that a doctor cannot be forced to do this. You cannot force them, nor should there be any list, as someone has suggested, of doctors who refuse to do it. Absolutely not. This is a personal, intimate matter for each individual. And understandable, moreover. Totally justifiable. So, from a human and medical point of view, I, for example, have to tell you something. Patients who are terminal, that is, I have operated on many cases of pancreatic, esophageal, stomach, colon cancer, etc. When you see that the cancer has metastasized, is in the final stage, the patient becomes irrecoverable. What I do, with the family's permission, is sedate them. A cocktail is administered for good measure with propofol, or if not, a lytic cocktail, etc., to sedate them. You take away their pain, anxiety, and distress. And if I were in this situation, I would ask for it to be done to me. I don't want suffering, you know, because suffering is inevitable. Physical pain, if you can eliminate it, then you eliminate it, and the discomforts and all that. And on some occasions, logically, this lytic cocktail can perhaps sometimes accelerate death, but it's an imminent death. It's in the final phase. For me, this isn't euthanasia. I've done this many times in my career. Well, I've done it, and the control of this treatment is done with morphine, whatever it may be, by experts, not by me, because I don't know how to do this. Now, causing death, euthanasia, in a person who is conscious. Do you remember there is a movie they made about that boy who jumped into the sea? He got hurt, Ramon San Pedro, mar adentro. Yes, mar adentro. He suffered a cervical spine injury, and this man ended up with tetraplegia, which is called paralysis. So these people, there comes a time when they ask for death. I understand this. Humanly, I understand it. I understand that there are people who live this way, and I don't want to live like that. I understand it. I tell you. Is punishable or not? I believe no one has the right to say this is punishable. I don't dare say it isn't punishable. God forbid, you know? I mean, on the contrary, I don't say that. I accept that there are people who request it. If he, personally and internally, agrees with himself to request it and have it done, know that the patient always has the right until the very last second to say, stop, okay? I don't want to do it now. You must stop immediately. The patient always has the right until the very last second to retract. I accept all of this. Now I tell you, according to my principles, for me, life is fundamental. It is the most important thing. Life is a miracle. I assure you, life is a miracle. I do not dare to end a life. Now I accept that there are people who request it, and that there are doctors who, according to their principles, practice it. God forbid I criticize them, neither one nor the other, okay? I accept it. There are people who, for their existential conception, living under certain emotional and physical conditions, goes against their principles. And this person, well, they request. In any case, also, there are protocols to follow. There are principles that must be followed, right? For someone to come to me and say they are normal, and because they are depressed or have had a problem, they say, listen, I don't want to live anymore, kill me. No, man, not this, right? There has to be a justification, doesn't there? But those people who have a medical justification and who request it, I believe they deserve respect.
Various scientific studies indicate that we will all meet our end eventually. I've read a ton of reviews, papers, studies, and they all agree that in principle we are all going to die at some point. I agree. After the journey you have embarked on and continue to pursue, how do you feel about your own death?
I'm not afraid of it at all. The only thing I will tell you is that I will use palliative care. Anything that involves physical pain, discomfort, inconvenience, if I can eliminate them, I will. I will never request euthanasia. I will use, as much as possible, the intensive care I need. But the transfer, I don't have it. I am so clear about this, I assure you, that I am going to a better place. I will be more or less fine, according to my karma. And I am very clear about it from the evidence I have seen in my patients, that my true identity, what makes me unique and exclusive, which is holistic with the primary consciousness that is eternal, and this will endure in the other dimension, in the astral plane. Therefore, I have no fear. What I do say is that all the pains, discomforts I don't have to endure, I will get rid of them and I will try. I sadly have to tell you that in this country we have a euthanasia law, which I find appropriate. But we don't have an intensive care law. Many people die poorly attended, and this is not right. I will strive to die in this correct sense regarding physical treatment. But I repeat to you that I am not afraid at all.
Do you know Dr. Enrique Benito? Enrique Benito, a specialist in palliative care, is a doctor who has authored a book about a child who became upset with death.
I have references about him, but I don't know him personally, nor have I read his work.
He was present on the podcast, and I believe it is very interesting indeed.
Palliative care specialists are extremely important people. Extremely important because they can assist individuals in transitioning to the final phase of our journey. And it's impressive how much they can help. It's a lot. And the knowledge they can gain from near-death experiences. It's a very frequent phenomenon. It's estimated that almost 70% of people can experience it. Near-death experiences are, I recall cases that I have witnessed, patients who are already terminal, who are already sedated, and who have their family by their side, and suddenly they sit up and start talking to a relative. I have cases where they speak with their spouse who has already passed away. They start talking this and that, and then they turn to their children and say, didn't you see? Your mother was at the foot of the bed coming to get me. This is very common. Connecting at the end with loved ones who come to help with the transition. The relatives don't see anyone. And then they told me the next day, sir, what is this? I say, don't worry, this is common. These are the experiences of people who are about to die during the transition. Don't be afraid. The final transition is wonderful. It is of peace, harmony, and joy at the end, which is when the superconsciousness is released.
Do you have plans for the other side?
Yes. For example, I am sure I will meet with very dear ones and friends, and I will wait for those who stay behind. And if I can help those who remain here, I will help them. But it doesn't scare me at all. It's part of my existence. It's just that we think about being born, living. I don't want to mention death, but if it's part of our existence is a cycle. To be born, to live, and to die. And to die is one dies as one lives. Never forget this. He who lives with the ego conditions fear. Every fear that a human being has, no matter how trivial, is always a fear of death, provoked by the ego. Because the ego knows that with physical death, since it has a material origin, it will disappear. So, calm down, nothing's wrong. We must accept death as a step, as natural as birth and living. And what we must ensure is that the transition is Sadly, we have lived through a very sorrowful time in this regard, during the pandemic era. Do you know that our patients were dying, isolated, alone, in intensive care, and unable to see their families? This is truly sad. One must die. The most ideal way is surrounded by your loved ones, with love, with good music in the background, and in the end, with good palliative care. This is how one should die. The transition is a fundamental stage of our life, and it must be respected and treated as it should be. Just as when one is alive at birth and requires care, death, the transition, requires care, and we must provide them. But don't be afraid, don't be afraid.
Precisely, Dr. Enrique Benito, now that you were mentioning dying accompanied, surrounded by the people who love us, he emphasized a lot on warning about a mistake we make when someone is facing death, a loved one, and we try to hold on to them in some way. We say, no, please, don't leave me here. That's what the doctor told me. Leave in peace. Go calmly. We are fine here. Go calmly. Go calmly. We stay here.
Peace, harmony, hold their hand, tell them don't be afraid, we'll see each other. You move on to a better place. It's the law of life. We all go through this. Now you're doing it at this moment, but you have our love, our memory, and we will stay in touch. We will send you positive energy. Stay. Don't go. This is utter madness. It should never be done. And I suppose he also advises, so I know about him. He advises dying surrounded by love and the people you care about. This is important.
And may they help you on your way so you can relax. Go easy. Most importantly, go easy, because we can take care of this. Because many times people, I remember my grandmother was obsessed not with her death, but with what she was leaving behind.
This is due to ignorance. Grief is what's fatal. It's the ignorance of those of us who remain. We only think about the absence, when what we should think is that he has made his journey and is in a better situation than us. And we will go later and see him. He has made his journey. Then, the mourning. There are countries, for example in Mexico, where death is known to be a festive act, because they recognize that there is life after. It moves to another life, another energetic dimension. Therefore, any attempt to hold on to negative things is nonsense. It's ignorance. And then all this creates tremendous mourning for those who stay. A suffering, tears, things that are not. Logically, we will always have the memory and a certain sadness. It's logical, the absence. But the moment the sadness comes, he is in another situation. And he is better off than when he was here. And I will meet him. And I send him positive energy. To assist you in your development, this is what needs to be done.
Doctor, this has been one of the most interesting conversations I've had in recent times, and that's 400 already. I am extremely grateful that you have taken the time for me. I know you have a very tight schedule, and I don't want to be an obstacle in fulfilling it. This is your home whenever you wish to return. We have a lot to talk about. Thank you.
It has been a pleasure being here with you, and I liked how you handled the conversation with such naturalness, spontaneity, and authenticity. In other words, it was a friendly chat, just the way I like it. Because sometimes journalism seeks sensationalism, and with sensationalism, then conversations can be heavily manipulated. On the other hand, with you, I have seen a lot of naturalness, and I have felt very comfortable. Thank you as well. Thank you also for your words.
Now, what I am going to ask you is that before you leave me a dedication here.
Thank you, Doctor. A pleasure.